sports leagues in the world on race, gender, and politics. However, is the NBA's drug policy archaic? Is it time for a league that pushed out Sterling and that features Becky Hammon and other excellent women on the coaching sidelines to see the worldwide progression on a discussion around medical use of cannabis and update their rules? Kevin Durant thinks so, saying the following on Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson's All the Smoke podcast. It's just like marijuana is marijuana. It's not harmful to anybody. It can only help and enhance and do good things. I feel like it shouldn't even be a huge topic around it anymore. So Matt Barnes joins us on this discussion. No one better. It being on your podcast, that is doing great, by the way. All the Smoke.
Me being an advocate.
Absolutely.
All the Smoke podcast.
All the Smoke podcast, absolutely. Stephen A., we'll start with you. I know KD's your guy. Does he have a point?
I'm not sure he does. And let me say that I've been very, very popular for saying stay off the weed.
Stay off the weed.
We all know that. We all know that. We all know that. But I got to give my brother Matt Barnes a lot of props and love here because, you know, myself, I joined him and Steven Jackson on All the Smoke. They're doing a tremendous job. Congratulations. Major props to y'all. Y'all doing it up, man. But here's the deal. I appreciate the conversation Matt and I had both on the podcast, on the air, off the air. And I appreciate the education that he provided me because he's absolutely right. I don't know why people out there expected me to get in a beef with Matt Barnes about this, but when he said I was ignorant about the marijuana stuff, he's absolutely damn right. I am. Because I don't pretend to know what my position has been and has always been, which I said with my appearance on All the Smoke is, I don't have a problem with weed use. I have a problem with guys that let it affect their money. If a league has a policy in place that prohibits it, even though Max is absolutely right about alcohol and all of this other stuff that you want to bring into the fray, the bottom line is they have a rule in place. And if you know what the rule is and you violate it and cost yourself tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, or in some rare cases even more than that, because you can't stay off the weed, I got a problem with you. If it don't cost you any money, I don't have a problem with you. I think in the case of Kevin Durant, I think you can make a legitimate argument that in some cases, he's absolutely right. Most cases, I would dare say. I have always been a proponent of marijuana for medicinal purposes being used. I've never been an adversary to that at all. For medicinal purposes, as I said, my mother, God rest her soul, passed away from cancer 2.5 years ago, and I considered having her use marijuana for medicinal purposes. No question she didn't want to do it, but I considered it and I broached it to her. So I understand it. But in terms of recreational use, I think marijuana affects different people different ways. And I have personally seen dudes come on the court. Ha! Now, this is in the past, many, many years ago, when I was a beat writer covering the Philadelphia 76ers. That no, I'm not talking about Allen Iverson, but I've seen it. I've seen it happen. Now, that's not to say that's the case in most instances. That's not to say that's the case in all instances. Of course, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if you're a league and you prefer to guard against that because you think it would be detrimental, then I don't have a problem with it. So it's not to say that KD is wrong, because I don't think he's wrong, but I do think it's unrealistic to say under no circumstances could this leave somebody inebriated, could compromise their level of play, etc. I don't believe that's totally true. In most instances, probably. But totally true, I'm not so sure.
All right, lot to get to there. Number one, I don't know why this conversation becomes about addicts. Cannabis is not considered addictive. Now, people have been addicted to it. My personal belief is, logic tells you it's probably massive doses of nicotine that people get when they smoke blunts because of the cigar paper. That's probably what people. But even if you say some people actually get addicted to cannabis itself, why does that mean the small percentage of cases that are addicts? Why does that inform your entire policy? Because there are alcoholics who also show up drunk to games, right? And that doesn't mean that there's a prohibition against alcohol. Let me get into some history here real quick. The reason there's a prohibition ongoing against cannabis is because at one point, alcohol and cannabis were both prohibited But there was a drug czar, the first in this country's history, Harry S. Anslinger, who was looking for a political issue, found cannabis as an issue and demonized it, made up science. The government invented science that did not exist. It was just lies, propaganda and lies about how, and there were quotes from Anslinger. Cannabis, or marijuana, he called it, because it sounded more Mexican, and therefore he could demonize it further to parts of this country. Makes the darker races feel they're equal to the white man. Literally, stuff like this. That's how weed got demonized in propaganda films, like Reefer Madness, which just made up the effects of cannabis. That's number one. And so I would say, if you're in bed with alcohol companies, and every study ever done said alcohol's worse for you than weed, that's the standard. Now, why is that issue? Like KD says, it's not a big deal. Shouldn't be a big deal anymore, right? I agree with him, but it's like human rights. This stuff should not be up for referendum. We've seen throughout our history that sometimes simple issues of human rights, well, now it's popular. Now we can pass these laws. It's popular. Right. Human rights are up for referendum? Or are they consistent? Are they constant? Same thing with cannabis here. KD's right. It doesn't feel like a big deal anymore. But the problem is this. The science hasn't changed in the last couple decades. It's not like people have new knowledge of it. It's just become more popular. If you look at what a Schedule 1 drug means, which is how cannabis is classified absurdly, incorrectly, and as a result of lies and propaganda, it's highly addictive, right? So it has to have a potential for addiction. And you're talking about stuff like, hardcore drugs, heroin and things like that. But it's not that. No. It never has been that. It will never be that. It's just made up nonsense. So while I'm very glad that popular opinion has changed, it's absurd that it was ever classified incorrectly for political and propaganda reasons. And the fact that KD says it's not a big deal anymore is instructive. It's not a big deal anymore. The issue is it never should have been a big deal.
So let's dive deeper. And I know this is something that you kind of brought up, Matt. What is the underlying reason for that kind of messaging really around cannabis?
It's always been race. First of all, shout out KD, because I've always said it's going to take a superstar to really stand behind this for us to make any kind of progress, especially in the NBA. He's done that. People like myself and Al Harrington have continued to push the narrative and the positive attributes of cannabis. But like I said, it started back in the 30s.
Wait, Matt, before you go, I really want to preface this because people get so up in arms when you try to make any topic about race. So I really want you to be careful.
Well, just look at the history.
Like
Max mentioned the history. Looking back to the 30s, it's always been a darker-skinned people using it, causing problems. When marijuana, everybody uses marijuana, but it's always been stereotyped towards the darker-skinned people. But if you look, I agree with Stephen A. Smith. If it costs you money, it's a problem. My thing is it shouldn't cost you money. The rules are outdated. They've been outdated. And I think when I first came in the NBA, we used to get tested one time in the preseason. So it wasn't like you were promoting smoke cannabis, but you weren't going to get in trouble for it. And things were great back then. So I think we need to get back to there. There's so many positive effects that can come from this: sleep, focus, inflammation. It just helps you with so many different things. So it's time for them to change their policies. I think it's getting more progressive now. There's more research now. You can talk until you're blue in the face, but until there's medical research behind what we're talking about, we're not going to make any headway. There's finally some medical research behind it, and I think cannabis should be used, just like anything else, very responsibly, but it'd be very beneficial for athletes.
All right, we're actually going to continue this conversation coming up out of the break.
When we get back.
Absolutely, Stephen A. Yeah, we're going to take a break right now. Matt is sticking with us, and Max later will tell us why a Hall of Famer is
at the beginning. Laura.
That would be Zion Williamson. He has been as advertised for the Pelicans. He currently averages 29.5 points per game per 36 minutes. If he's able to keep that up, it would be the best mark by a rookie in NBA history. It's only been 13 games, but his 23.3 points per game average this season is on pace to be the most by a rookie since Allen Iverson 23 years ago. He scored at least 14 points every game. What makes Zion so amazing, though, is how efficient he's been. He shot 57% from the field. The last rookie to average 20 points per game and shoot at least 55% was Shaq. So, it's so much fun to talk about Zion. We got Shanae and Matt here. Shanae, I want to start with this. Has Zion been as good or better than you thought he would be at this level?
I think he's better. He's exceeded all expectations. There's no coincidence that he's here. He's playing 9 straight 20-point games. The Pelicans have won 5 of 7. And if you think about his game, you just mentioned it all. I mean, 23 points per game, 7 rebounds, 57% from the field.
Crazy.
Now, the coolest part, like players, you know this, Matt, coaches love players that they don't have to run plays for. Like that can be productive in the open court, that can get offensive rebounds, that can, in transition, facilitate for others. You don't have to run a play.